Hello, I'm Doug Flo, and today I'd like to share with you my experience with 2024's Inktober. For those who don't know, Inktober is a daily drawing challenge that takes place in, as the name suggests, October. An ordered list of 31 themes is given to the public, and artists who want to challenge themselves this month can then make a drawing a day following these themes. And this month, I decided to partake in that event myself. So, I wanted to share what I did this month, talk about the pieces I made, and my reasoning behind why I did the challenge in the first place. Before we begin, though, I'd like to say that I know analyzing my own art and explaining my intentions behind my pieces is kind of arrogant. The main reason I do this video is to be able to take a look back on this month, to archive my thoughts in a comprehensive manner. I also find that analyzing my own work and trying to explain it concisely is a very interesting exercise. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm making this video for myself, but I still thought that what I talk about would be interesting to hear about. So I hope it is. Before we talk about the drawings themselves, let's talk about what I've made more generally. First of all, and while I know that was the main point of the event, but I didn't do ink drawings. This month I was more interested in fleshing out my pixel art skills, so that's what I decided to draw. I was looking for something small. I didn't want to spend hours on drawing every night, just a bit of work to get something cool. We'll talk more about that later on, but for now, just know that I've decided on a small 32 pixels by 32 pixels canvas, and it's the same for the color palette. I was searching for something simple, so I chose Nelson SMG's Indecision palette that I found on Lovespec. The link will be in the description. It has 17 colors with a variety of hues and shades, especially on the blues and beige, so really nice palette there. Now we can talk about the pieces themselves. I'm showing them on the screen now. I mainly made scenes or items on a dark background, all completed with a lighter frame. This structure helps link all of the drawings into a single group, which I really like the idea of since they're all part of the same challenge. So, here's how we're gonna do it for this video. First, I'll talk about the main theme my drawings had throughout the month. Next, we'll talk about the things I learned and what I improved on. Then I'll show you my creative process with a recording of my drawing on day 26. After that, we'll talk about some individual days, ones that I have things to say about. And finally, I'll wrap back on the theme with the final week's conclusion. We good? Let's go then. So, I've been showing the images since the start, so you might have noticed a recurring element. This guy. The theme on day 2 was Discover, and I had an idea for a drawing that required creating a character and a world, as well as a reason for him to be there. We'll talk more about day 2 later on, but the end result featured this blue guy in a world with multiple environments. And in cases like these, my brain runs wild on its own and imagines a story, a context to the whole thing. This man is on an adventure. He came to this world to explore it, discover its biomes and structures. It may sound like I'm exaggerating, and yeah, I am. It's just one drawing. But then came day 3, with the theme Boots, and I was struggling to find a fun way to draw, well, boots. But then came the idea of using the little adventurer, portraying him as putting on the boots, maybe to get ready to explore or something. From there, I knew that adding a little narrative to my drawings would add so much to all of it. And as such, throughout the month, the drawings followed the exploration of the adventurer and the activities he took part in. On day 5, with the theme Binoculars, he's scoping out the land. On days 8 and 9, Hike and Sunrise, he's looking at the mountain he's about to climb, and then he's contemplating the sunrise on top of the peak. On day 22, he's camping outside. I drew his passport and journal on days 7 and 17 with the respective themes. The car on day 18's bridge is supposedly his. This was really fun to do. It gave me ideas for when I was stumped by the theme and motivated me as I wanted to know what adventures I'd put him on next. And as the day passed, his design got refined and became more concise. yeah, I assure you. And I got better and better at posing and drawing him. Look at day 10, for example. The pose he's in is a bit awkward, and while the small canvas size was mostly responsible for it, my lack of experience was also to blame, for sure. But then came day 16, my favorite drawing, and here the pose is a lot more complex, yet it's pretty readable, if I do say so myself. He feels more alive with his back bent and his head slightly raised, looking at the moon in front of him. Days 24, 27, and 30 also show that improvement. Throughout the month, it felt like the little guy came alive, but we'll have the opportunity to talk a bit more about that later on. And for now, I'll just use these discussions as a way to segue into the other improvements I've made throughout the month. On a general note, I feel like the creation process felt a lot more natural near the end. I could quickly get the basic shapes going, and I felt more confident when placing, texturing, and detailing the elements of my drawings. I feel like I've also gotten better at telling a story in a static image without text, like on days 16 and 18, and basically the final week, which we'll get back to. Finally, and what is perhaps my biggest improvement, I got better at drawing shadows, highlights, and more generally at texturing surfaces. I mean, look at day 1. Nothing terrible, but the pumpkin feels pretty flat due to the thin and consistent shading, a mistake I made again on day 14. Yet, look at day 16 or 23. The shadows are much cleaner and help fill the surface of the object a lot more. And the aspect of this I'm the proudest is definitely texturing rocks and mountains. I was already pretty happy with days 8 and 9, it's simple yet effective. It shows the mountains as a simple yet rugged surface. And yet, days 19, 25, and most importantly 28 showed an improvement and diversification in the process, with more complex, more detailed mountainsides. I'm quite proud of the peaks and mountains I've made throughout the month, and they're probably the biggest marker of my progress throughout the challenge. Alright, so let's now talk about how I went creating the pieces. First, I take a look at the theme. It might sound like a basic step, I know, but it's still an important one, as I wasn't looking ahead while making it. I'd usually discover the theme right before making the art. Then, before doing anything on computer, I'd draw my ideas on paper, sometimes during the ideation process. It helped me concretize the idea without having to bother with the limitations of pixel art. You can see the sketches on the screen now. It's nothing too complex, but it was really helpful in making sure I depict my ideas clearly. Finally, it was time to draw. To start, I draw the main element of the piece, in this case, the camera. I'd roughly jot down its shape, then add more colors, details, working on it bit after bit. As you can see here, I started with a square, I had the lens, and all the other details on there, like the shading and what's being reflected in the glass. After that, the pattern repeats with the next most important element. Here, the character. The head and its shading, the arms and their shading, the body and, yeah, you guessed it, its shading. All of this until it's pretty much finished. I'd usually repeat this on every major element until the piece was mostly completed. Then, I'd go back to previous parts of the drawing, adding some shadings and details like you can see here on the camera. Sometimes I'd also experiment with what I did. So like here you can see I tried adding an outline, or I attempted to shade the lens to make the things reflected in it less clear. And once all of that is done, the final step is to add the moons and stars if the drawing featured them, which in this case it does. You can see my process for adding them right there, and at this point I was pretty used to doing that in general. Finally, once all of it is done, I'd save my pieces as a 32 by 32 PDN file, which is paint.net's file format, a 32 by 32 PNG, and after adding my signature, a 1920 by 1920 image that I'd then post on my various socials. And that's the process I repeat for most of my pieces, with, yeah, some variation depending on what I'm making that day. Okay, well, we are getting close to the end, but before I conclude, I want to take you through a few individual days as there are some interesting things I'd like to point out. Day 1, backpack. Gotta start at the beginning, as day 1 was very interesting. I was trying to get my footing at the start of the challenge, and it's where I learned a lot of valuable information. Sketching the idea on paper, for example. At first, I wanted to make a simple scoot backpack, but when I had some trouble getting the shape right, I decided to try and portray it on paper first, especially to be able to visualize the perspective I was trying to achieve. After a while, I realized the backpack idea wasn't working and that I needed to remake the idea. That's where the idea of mixing the theme with Halloween came into play, leading to this jack-o'-lantern backpack full of candy. Day 2, discover. I already touched on this one, but I'd like to give you more insights on the idea that started the whole narrative. The theme made me visualize a man on top of a hill, looking down at the beautiful world it has just discovered. A bit like the opening sequence of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, when Link comes out of the Shrine of Resurrection. This is why I made all of these biomes, to show the diversity of the place. This was the perfect way to kickstart the month, as the idea of this much larger world stayed in my head as something unexplored, inspiring many of the following drawings. Day 3, boots. For this one, I just want to point out two things. First, that was the day I understood layering was going to be an issue. With the limited color palette, separating the layers of an image was difficult, and today was a perfect example of that, as I had layered 3 parts that were technically all of the same color. I got around the issue with shading and by positioning the parts to separate them as much as possible. Secondly, you can see that I use light blue to highlight the hand in the back. This is one of the inconsistencies I had with the character's design at the start. You'll notice that color was never used again on him. Well, except on one exception. See if you can spot it in my various drawings. Day 13, Horizon. Quite a big leap here. Day 13 was interesting as it was the first time I represented something that already existed. The theme was pretty close to what I had already done on day 9, so I was looking for something else to draw. And that's where Horizon made me think of a black hole's event horizon. I had seen many drawn black holes on social media, always fascinated at how such a complex shape was effortlessly conveyed. So I saw that there is an opportunity to make my own. It wasn't easy, and the result is, well, decent at least. But it was invaluable when it came to learning how to depict things that already existed. It sounds simple, but drawing something that's already there was harder than with my own ideas, and this day was good practice as that. Day 14, Rome. Alright, so this day is very important as this drawing is probably the one I'm the least proud of. And yet, it's one of the ideas I enjoyed the most. So, in an attempt to expand the world and its biomes, I wanted to represent the character roaming through the biome depicted on day 12, right there in the back. I already had taken some time then to think about how it would look like, as I found the idea of these pink trees when I needed to fill up the place the biome occupied. Before drawing on day 14, I took some time to sketch the trees, trying to find a good look for them, and as you can see I ended up with something that's decently interesting at least. Even while drawing it, I came up with these bushes with green fruits in them to spice up the ground. But the end result? Eh, the trees look flat and are generally pretty ugly, especially that one at the front. Its trunk is too visible and it's not big enough compared to where it is on the image. The character blends in with the ground and is pretty badly posed, and the ground also feels empty and flat. Overall, I didn't like the end result, and I still don't. But most of why are things I did better in later, and sometimes even earlier drawings. This was just a bad one. It showed that my skill and experience are obviously still quite low, but it didn't mean anything more than that. It was just more of an exception than anything else. I feel like at least. Day 15, Guidebook. This one's just a funny story. So, like, I couldn't be bothered rendering a generic book, and as such, I started to look in other directions, leading me to Gravity Falls' journals. In the show, and if you're pretty loose about it, they kinda act like guidebooks, I guess? Eh, that was good enough for me to draw Journal 3. Plus, I really liked the show and I just rewatched it not too long before. Well, guess what the theme on day 17 was? Yep, that's right. The theme was journal. Seriously. So yeah, I ended up drawing a generic book. Though I tried adding some interesting things, with flowers coming from the green plains that I've depicted before, and a bunch of photos, some referencing previous drawings I had done. Day 16. Grungy. Alright, so I'm gonna brag a bit there, which is pretty ironic because I feel like I've been doing that throughout the whole video, but day 16 is by far my favorite drawing. There's just something about the vibe, the posing, the characters' clothes and how I drew them. I'm really proud of this one. At first I was having some trouble drawing it since I was looking to represent a flannel, then some more clothings, I think. I was having some trouble with the thing, basically. But I ended up landing on this idea for a scene and it ended up being really cool. That's about it for this day. I just really like what I did with this one. Day 21. Rhinoceros. Alright, last one we'll talk about. Today's theme wasn't very good. The thing is, it's too specific, it leaves very little room for creativity. And so after trying to find a way to cheat a bit by representing a different scene that just happened to include a rhinoceros, I decided to just bite the bullet and go for it. Changing myself like that felt like it could help me get better at drawing animals and things that already exist. And in the end, I'm pretty proud of what I did. Did I mainly copy a photo on Google? Yeah, kinda. I depicted the rhinoceros scene in this picture. Is it perfect? Oh god, no. But is it decent? Yeah, and that's enough for me. It was really interesting trying to recreate this image in pixel art and adding my own touch to it to make sure it looked good even with the small canvas size. All in all, very beneficial. Yeah, I've probably been saying rhinoceros wrong, but I can't be bothered looking up how you say it. After 3 weeks of drawings, it started to dawn on me that the end of the month was coming soon. As such, I decided to introduce a stronger narrative on the final week of drawings. On day 24, I depicted the explorer at the campsite present on day 22, observing a strange beam of light in the distance. Throughout the week that followed, the character can be seen trekking through the mountains and lakes, going back to previously seen places, always towards the strange light. On the final day, to make a proper send-off to the month, I animated a small sequence showing the character entering the beam through a small passageway. Then, as the camera zooms out, the beam of light can be seen shrinking, and finally, disappearing again. Interpret this as you like, it's not anything too grandiose nor very original, but I personally really like that ending. I think that's what matters most. We're getting close to the end of the video, so before the usual plug of my social media, though stay for that, as it's not actually that usual yet, and it's important for me regarding the projects I work on next. There's one question I'd like to answer. Why? Why did I partake in a daily, month-long drawing challenge with little experience with pixel art to begin with? Well, for a quick story, I used to work on a video game before any of this. The devlogs are on my channel, you can watch them if you want, as I still really like what I did with them. At the end of the third one, I said I'd be taking a break from the project to focus on smaller, more manageable projects, until I was ready to tackle something bigger. So I started working on a smaller game which I stopped working on not long after, as it was still too much for me. Then I started working on a smaller, different project, which I keep vague as I'd still like to post a video on it. But yeah, basically while working on said video, I had to take a break as I realized there was one major issue with me. I did not enjoy working on these projects. And that's mainly because I've stopped thinking of projects like these as something fun. To spare you the whole life backstory, I basically went through times in my life that ended up making me dread working on projects. So, I needed to take a break while I worked on my mental situation. And then I thought, hey, let's partake in Inktober. And my break promptly ended then and there. Well, it wasn't exactly like that, but I basically figured that working on small daily projects over a long period of time would help me get back into all of it. The project was to make small, manageable pieces that would take me about an hour to make. Then I'd share them all around on my socials, to my friends, family. But most importantly, my goal was to make sure I was having fun with them. The limitations and decisions I took throughout the month were all aimed towards that goal, making working fun. And at the end of the day, I think I managed to achieve that goal. Let's see if I can carry that momentum forward now. Which leads us here, to the end of the video. But don't go. I just have a few things to talk about before the end. It'll be quick. So, from now on, and until I feel confident working on bigger things, I'm making small explorations into unknown territories like this one. I've been meaning to get serious about pixel art for a while, and I'm glad I managed to sort of do it. And while I'm not done with that, there's so much more I'd like to explore, such as making music, rendering 3D scenes, developing smaller games where I focus more on the art and programming. There's a lot of smaller experiments like this one I want to make, and most importantly, that I'd like to share. So, what to expect? Firstly, I'll be making small, simple videos like this one for all of them. YouTube is still the main place on which I want to share all these things. So don't worry if you don't want to bother with other platforms, you'll be able to catch every project here. But if you're interested in more frequent update on whatever I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. On Instagram, I'll be posting end results, completed pieces, basically a cleaner feed of projects. While on Blue Sky, I'll post more messy, in-the-moment updates on my projects. So, depending on what you're interested in and what platform you use most, you can follow me on either or both of these. The links will all be in the description. Anyway, I never really know how to write here except for, well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to thank everyone that supported me and followed my drawing throughout the month. You guys are legends, and you helped me out a ton. I hope you all are having a great day, and I'll be seeing you later on whatever platform we meet next. Goodbye.